Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So, with the completion of Milestone II in the Redeemed Citadel campaign, we gained access to a new artifact, the Golden Memories artifact. Now, this artifact has a certain buffs that allows us to gain a whole lot more damage. However, it's only decent when you're in a AoE environment where there's a whole bunch of mobs. Now, is this artifact actually good, and how does it compete with other such artifacts that you would normally use when you're in an AoE environment, where you have a whole bunch of mobs and you just want to kill them as quickly as possible? Well, let's go ahead and see. Now, first up, how do you obtain this new artifact? Well, you can easily obtain it from the Zen market for 1,000 Zen. Alternatively, you could obtain it from the auction house here at 1,000,000 Astral Diamonds. So, for testing purposes, and actually I might equip this artifact for my tank build, I'm going to purchase it here with the Zen since it will be cheaper than purchasing it on the auction house. Let's go ahead and spend the Zen, and the artifact should just pop into my inventory just here. So, here we have the artifact on its epic variant. Now, the reason I would equip this on a tank is due to the fact of the set. I wouldn't equip it as a primary artifact unless perhaps I have a DPS build and essentially you just want to do more damage while you're fighting a whole bunch of mobs. This could definitely help you, especially as paladin tanks where we can spam off multiple different AoE encounters within the time frame of this artifact. Anyway, let's go ahead and I'm going to jump over to the preview server and let's upgrade this and test it in comparison to what I would believe as the competitive artifact for AoE DPS. Alright, so here we are in the preview server and I'm on my DPS character, my rogue. Now, here we have the Golden Memories artifact just right here, still on its epic variant. So let's go ahead and upgrade that all the way to mythic. First up though, if we go ahead and look at the actual bonus from the Golden Memories artifact, you can see there the reason I would say it's very good for AoE damage is because whenever you hit an enemy with this artifact, you gain 3% more damage, and this can stack up to a total of 5 times, giving you a total of 15% more damage. If we upgrade this all the way to mythic, let's go ahead and upgrade it to legendary first, and then on to mythic finally. And here we have it on mythic. Now you'll notice, similar to the epic variant, it still has that 3% damage for every enemy you hit, and it is however only lasting 6 seconds, which means you can gain a total of 15% extra more damage, but only for 6 seconds. This is especially what leads me to question whether this is actually the best AoE artifact. I don't believe there are any other AoE artifact that will give you a buff of 15% more damage to basically all your damage output, regardless of for the duration. And therefore this does make it one of the special artifacts. Now, it is one of the newer artifacts, so it will have that benefit of having 300 item level, and to go with that, the extra stats that it grants. And the stats on these are not actually bad at all, giving you HP, which you can never have enough of, power, which you can also never have enough of, and then that other third one there being crit, which is kind of meh. If you already have that cap, then this ain't going to be something that's going to worry you too much about. But if you do not have the storyteller journals, like my character does not currently have right now, well, this is the preview server. On the live server I do have them, but if I don't, you can see I'm using the alternative ones. Now I'm missing one here which would be ideal, which would be the Sword of Zariel, which also gives power and HP. And I can go ahead and switch out the Golden Memories artifact for, let's say, my Trobriand ring. There we go. And you can see I'll gain a buff in my HP, and my power will stay the same because the Trobriand ring also gave me that 3000 power. And then the Sword of Zariel would replace the Staff of Flowers here, giving me also that 6000 HP along with the 3000 power. and therefore making these artifacts like really good, similar to the Hallister's Blast Scepter. However, we're here mainly to talk about using it as a primary artifact, so let's go ahead and drag and drop that here. First up, let's go ahead and actually see what the visuals look like from this kind of standpoint. I go ahead and cast it, and you can see it creates like the holy circle that you would see from Zariel. I'll put that up screen here, so you can see she gets all those orbs, they rise up, and then they go ahead and burst, just as you saw there, like the artifact does. Anyway, the area effect of this artifact is a good decent 20-foot radius, making it fairly easy to hit all those enemies around you. Now let's go ahead to the dummies in Protector's Enclave and go ahead and see what this actually looks like against some stationary targets. Alright, so here we are. We have our 3 dummies. Let's go ahead and cast the artifact and let's see what it looks like. Stand next to this dummy, go ahead and hit the artifact, and it charges up and boom, hits all of those guys, giving me the damage buff from these 3 guys that I hit, and that should be a total of 9% for damage just because I just hit 3 guys. Another thing I'd like to mention there, you can see when I actually go ahead and cast the artifact, the initial cast will be like this, then I'll be able to do powers and stuff, and it will only hit there, as you can see, after it charges up. It's probably about 3 seconds there, time it properly, and that means you'll have to wait a few seconds before you actually want to be using those encounters. As soon as you cast this artifact, that's when you want to make sure you're in position, and you want to have all of your encounters off cooldown, so you can immediately cast them while this artifact buff is up for those 6 seconds. So here we gather up a whole bunch of mobs. Let's go ahead and cast the artifact. Use a few at wills. It's burst, so now we use all of our encounters, and boom, they're all dead, except the ones on the very outsides. And there we go. Now, it's really dependent on your character and your build, how much this actual 15% is going to benefit you. I know for myself in particular, this artifact isn't going to make a huge impact, mainly due to the fact that, yeah, these mobs in Avernus at the moment, I can pretty much kill very efficiently without even using any artifact. I can just use my encounters, and they're pretty much dead like within a few seconds, as you just saw there. And therefore, it's not particularly needed for me to use any artifact. Now, if you're running dungeons and whatnot, and you're trying to compete with, let's say, other DPSers in your group, and you're essentially just racing each other neck to neck, and about who can get the most damage, then yes, AoE damage may play into effect. But there is no game mechanics where you need to do a certain amount of damage, otherwise you're not going to pass, let's say, a test and you'll end up failing the run. No, there isn't anything like that. Where there, of course, there is in the trials and such, which rely on you to deal certain amount of single target damage, but not AoE damage, and therefore there isn't that much compulsion or necessary need to increase your output for AoE damage as much. And therefore, if this is something that's kind of out of your price range and you don't really need it for your character, you may as well just push it aside and not really bother with this artifact. Now, a very good alternative that I can suggest to you guys as an AoE artifact would be the Decanter of Anthropal Essence. Now, this effectively gives you a buff of 10% increase to your damage, and also causes your powers to deal an additional hit for damage whenever you strike them. Very good for rogues. And essentially you can keep this buff up for a total of 30 seconds. Due to the fact that this initial buff will be up for 20 seconds, and then you can increase this duration up to for another 10 seconds due to hitting enemies. Now, in order to make this buff be increased all the way to 10%, it will take you 10 seconds initially. So, in essence, yes, you will have 10% increase to damage for 20 seconds. Now, this is good for when you are just hauling through a dungeon and just killing the mobs as you go. Anyway, in conclusion, I believe this artifact excels in a situation just like this, where you just want to kill the enemies as quickly as possible in an area before they kill you. essentially casting that artifact just before you do all those encounters, just so that you can gain that buff before you go ahead and spam them all. Now, what can be annoying is when you don't have a tank in your party and you have to be the one who has to group up the mobs. Since, see, they'll do a whole lot of damage, then you have to wait for the artifact to go off and then do your encounters and essentially one-shot them all. Anyway, you can see there it's pretty highly effective, but it does require a little bit of time to set up and a little bit of waiting due to the fact of that about 3 seconds before it actually deals the damage. The actual damage it deals, that 6,000, is pretty meh, and other artifacts will trump it in just outputting pure damage. For example, Staff of Flowers will do an actual significant amount of damage just by itself due to the fact that it does 15,000 damage per tick for 15 seconds. And therefore this artifact has the potential to do just over 2,000 damage to any target that lasts for 15 seconds in its area. If you go ahead and cast it here, you can see it'll start ticking on those guys all for that 15. And if I can just bide my time here, go invisible and whatnot, you can see it will kill them over time. The more tanky ones will take a bit more effort on your own part to kill them. So, yeah, this was rather inconclusive, but it really depends on your playstyle and what type of effect you desire from your artifact. Whether it's to give you pretty much instantaneous, big, decent buff to all your damage, like the Golden Memories artifact, or is it an artifact that will be more like a utility and deal damage over time, like the Staff of Flowers, or will it be like the Decanter of Anthropal that will give you that buff for a decent duration, and therefore you can take the most out of it when you're just hauling through dungeons and killing everything as you go. Anyway, last thing to mention would be those artifacts that give you just action point gain, like the Envenomed Storyteller Journal, giving that 35% action point gain, or the Sigil of a Cleric, giving you that 25% action point gain. For some classes, it can really vary. For classes like the Rogue, where we have a daily power, like Whirlwind of Blades, where we can effectively gain our own damage buff, it's pretty much exactly like the Golden Memories artifact there, giving me a total of 15% more damage. It can be more effective if I can have the ability to cast this more often in combat. Hopefully this has been somewhat helpful, help you decide what kind of is best for you. I recommend just go for something that's in your budget limit, and the Golden Memories artifact is actually a very cool visual artifact in itself, and can be quite beneficial even just for a secondary artifact that just grants you those stats. But it's entirely up to you whether it's worth it in the end, as it is rather a pricey artifact. Anyway, hopefully I've presented this well. If I did, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. Goodbye for now.